The city streets were alive with lights, but the air was cold and sharp, cutting through the thick coat Ethan wore. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the roads slick and reflective. Steam rose from the grates, carrying the scent of oil and hot metal. Ethan had just finished a long shift at the spaceport. His back ached from lifting heavy crates, and his feet were sore from walking across the metal floors all day. Yet, despite the exhaustion, he felt a strange sense of purpose. Humanity, he thought, had always been about small acts of kindness. Even on a city night full of strangers, small gestures could mean everything. As he walked past an alley he usually ignored, a soft, almost imperceptible sound stopped him. At first he thought it was the wind rustling trash bags, but then he heard it again, a faint shiver, a small whimper. Ethan's heart tightened. He slowed, his eyes scanning the dark corners, and there, huddled against the wet wall, was a tiny figure. The girl was unlike anything he had seen before. Her skin was pale blue with delicate violet patterns that glimmered faintly under the streetlights. Her eyes were golden, wide and fearful, reflecting both the light and something deeper, a raw vulnerability that made Ethan's chest ache. She wore a thin, tattered dress, soaked and clinging to her small frame, clearly no protection against the cold night. Her tiny body trembled uncontrollably. Ethan knelt slowly, careful not to scare her further. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice was soft but steady, full of warmth. The girl flinched and pressed herself closer to the wall as if trying to disappear. Cold," she whispered, her voice barely audible, fragile and trembling. Without thinking, Ethan took off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her. The smell of leather and sweat filled the small space between them, but warmth radiated immediately. The girl leaned into him, her body relaxing fractionally against the human's chest. For a moment the world outside, the cold, the rain, the harsh neon lights, ceased to exist. "You're safe now," Ethan said gently, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. She looked up at him, her golden eyes glistening with a mix of fear and hope. It was a look that made him realize she had no one else to care for her. Ethan's mind raced. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had she ended up alone, shivering on a rainy street? But he pushed the questions aside. Right now she needed warmth, safety, and a human who would not turn away. "Come on, let's get you somewhere dry," he said, standing carefully and making sure the girl's small hand stayed tucked in his coat. He could feel her tiny fingers trembling inside the fabric, holding on to him like he was her only lifeline. They walked through the slick streets, Ethan shielding her as best he could from the wind and rain. Passers-by hurried by, oblivious, but he didn't care. Nothing else mattered except getting her somewhere safe. He could feel the weight of responsibility settle on him, heavier than any crate he had ever lifted. This little alien girl, lost and frightened, was now his concern. His humanity demanded that he act. Finally, they reached his small apartment, a modest place with warm lights and a kettle already waiting to boil water. Ethan led her inside, careful to close the door against the chill. He offered her a warm blanket and a mug of tea. She accepted slowly, sipping, still trembling but gradually calming. The warmth of the room and the human's kindness seeped into her small frame, easing the shivers just a little. "What's your name?" Ethan asked softly, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Lyra," she whispered, barely audible. "Lyra. That's a beautiful name. You can stay here tonight, Lyra. You're safe," he said, trying to offer more comfort than he felt he could give. For the first time that night, Lyra allowed herself to relax, leaning slightly into his warmth, and Ethan, looking down at her small, trembling figure, knew that his life had just changed forever. This little alien girl, alone and shivering in the darkness, had just given him a reason to fight for someone other than himself. And he would not fail her. The rain continued to fall outside, pattering gently against the windows of Ethan's small apartment. Inside, the warmth of the room was almost magical compared to the cold streets. Lyra sat on the couch, wrapped tightly in a blanket that smelled faintly of leather and smoke from the kettle. She hugged it close to her chest as if holding on to the last bit of safety she had ever known. Ethan moved quietly, not wanting to startle her. He boiled water for tea, the soft whistle of the kettle filling the room. He poured it carefully into 2 mugs and placed one in front of Lyra. She hesitated for a moment before taking it. Her small hands trembled, but the warmth seeped through her fingers and into her body. She sipped slowly, her golden eyes watching Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and fear. "You must be very cold," Ethan said gently. "And hungry, I guess." He reached into his small pantry and pulled out some bread and cheese. "It's not much, but it's something to start with." Lyra looked at the food for a long moment. Her alien instincts seemed to fight with her human curiosity. Finally, she took a small piece of bread and nibbled at it, tasting the new flavors cautiously. She had never eaten anything like it before. Her eyes lit up slightly at the unfamiliar, comforting taste. Ethan smiled quietly, relieved to see even a small sign of life in her expression. Hours passed slowly, filled with small gestures and quiet conversation. Ethan didn't ask too many questions. He knew she wasn't ready to tell her story yet. Lyra seemed content to simply watch him, studying his movements carefully. Every action he made, every word he spoke was catalogued in her sharp, intelligent mind. Despite her youth, there was a wisdom in her eyes that suggested she had seen more than most beings twice her age. "You can rest here tonight," Ethan said finally, noticing her eyelids growing heavy. "I'll make some space on the couch for you. You don't have to sleep on the floor." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. She shifted under the blanket, curling into a small, cautious ball. Ethan grabbed an extra pillow and set it beside her. She leaned slightly against it, her small frame slowly sinking into the soft support. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the soft sound of rain and the occasional sip of tea. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? How had she ended up alone in a city so far from home? He didn't know, and he didn't need to know yet. What mattered was that she was here, safe for the moment, and he would do everything he could to keep it that way. He sat across from her, pretending to read a book, but mostly just watching, making sure she was truly all right. As the night deepened, Lyra's curiosity slowly overcame her fear. She whispered small questions, hesitant and soft, about the city, about humans, about the lights she had never seen before. Ethan answered patiently, careful to use simple words she could understand. He told her stories of his world, how humans cared for one another, how small acts of kindness could change lives. Lyra listened, her golden eyes wide with wonder. She had never met a human who spoke so gently, who offered comfort without asking for anything in return. Slowly, she began to realize that maybe not all humans were dangerous. Maybe some could be trusted. Finally, she leaned against the blanket again, closing her eyes. Ethan reached over, carefully adjusting it around her small shoulders. She shivered once, then slowly relaxed. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra allowed herself to feel safe. Ethan watched her, a quiet determination forming in his heart. This little alien girl, shivering and alone in the rain, had just become the most important responsibility of his life. He didn't know her story, and he didn't need to yet. All that mattered was keeping her safe tonight, and every night that followed. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, there was warmth, shelter, and the first fragile seeds of trust. And for Lyra, that was enough to let hope begin to grow. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, painting golden stripes across Ethan's small apartment. Lyra was awake, sitting by the window, her golden eyes wide and alert. She traced patterns on the glass with her tiny fingers, but her gaze was fixed on the street outside. Ethan watched her quietly from the kitchen, a mug of tea warming his hands. "They'll come for me," Lyra whispered without turning. Her voice trembled, though she tried to make it soft, almost like a warning more to herself than to him. "Who will?" Ethan asked gently, setting the tea down on the counter. He felt a chill, not from the weather, but from the fear in her words. "My mother, and others." "They won't forgive me," she said, her shoulders hunched. Her voice was small, but it carried a weight far beyond her years. Ethan didn't press for details. He could see she wasn't ready to speak more. The seriousness in her eyes was enough to understand that danger was real, that this was not just a lost child in need of warmth. Ethan moved closer, kneeling beside her so she wouldn't feel trapped or threatened. "You're safe here, Lyra," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No one can hurt you while you're with me. I promise." She flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of fear and something else. Hope. It was fragile, like the first leaf of spring peeking through ice. Ethan knew then that he couldn't just give her a roof and blankets. He had to protect her in ways he had never imagined. Humanity thrived on courage, on facing the unknown for the sake of others, and he realized that this little alien girl had unknowingly called on the best of him. She had no choice in the matter, but he did. He would fight for her even if it meant standing against dangers he couldn't yet understand. The day passed slowly, with Ethan going about his routine while keeping a close eye on Lyra. She stayed near him, small and alert, asking soft questions about human habits, foods, and traditions. Ethan answered patiently, careful not to frighten her further. He noticed, though, that she was studying him, watching his movements, and learning in a way that went beyond a child's curiosity. Her mind was sharp, and he realized she might understand far more than she let on. By evening, Ethan returned from a brief walk with supplies, only to find Lyra quietly packing a small bag. "Where are you going?" he asked, alarmed. "I can't stay here forever. They'll find me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan shook his head. "No, you're not going anywhere. Not alone. You stay here with me. I won't let anyone take you." She looked at him with eyes that seemed to measure his soul, searching for any hint of betrayal or weakness. Then slowly she nodded, placing the bag down. She was trusting him. Completely, utterly, in a way that made him feel both honored and responsible beyond measure. As night fell, Ethan prepared their modest dinner. He sat close to her, speaking, softly, telling her stories of humans who had risked everything to help others. Lyra listened intently, her small hands gripping the blanket, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There was a spark there, a seed of understanding. Maybe humans were different than she had expected, capable of warmth, courage, and protection. Later, when they settled for the night, Lyra curled up close to him under the blanket. "I don't understand everything yet," she whispered. "You don't need to," Ethan replied. "You just need to know that I care. That's enough for now." Outside, the city lights glimmered through the rain, the world moving on without them, unaware of the tiny struggle unfolding in one small apartment. But inside, warmth and trust had begun to grow. And Ethan knew, deep down, that this bond, the fragile, powerful connection between human and alien child, was going to change both of their lives forever. For Lyra, there was still fear. Danger was still out there waiting. But for the first time in her short life, she had someone to protect her. Someone willing to risk everything. Someone truly human. And that gave her hope. The morning light was soft and gentle, filtering through the blinds and casting warm patterns on the floor. Ethan had just returned from a quick walk to get fresh supplies, and Lyra was waiting for him in the living room, sitting on the couch with her small hands folded in her lap. Her golden eyes were wide and serious, something heavier than fear lingering in them. She looked older than her small frame suggested, as if she carried the weight of many lifetimes. I need to tell you something," Lyra said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "It's about my mother, and why I ran." Ethan nodded. "Take your time. You don't have to tell me everything at once. I'm listening." Lyra took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling quickly. My mother, she is important, very important. She is a leader, a diplomat. She makes decisions that affect whole worlds, not just our people. Her eyes seemed to flicker with the memory of danger. Some enemies, they tried to hurt her. I ran away because they could use me to get to her. I didn't know where else to go. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. The little girl he had taken in, the one he had wrapped in his coat on a rainy night, was not just a lost child. She was the daughter of someone powerful, someone whose life and choices affected entire planets. The thought made his head spin, but he swallowed hard. He had no time for fear. All he could do was protect her. You are very brave, Lyra, Ethan said softly. Not many could survive something like this, alone and scared. But you don't have to face it alone anymore. I promise you that. Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes shimmering with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. But if they find me, if they know I'm here, they won't stop. They will come for me, for my mother, for everything. Her small voice cracked and she buried her face into the blanket Ethan had given her. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. Then we'll face them together. I don't know everything about your world or your enemies, but I know one thing. We humans don't give up on those who need us. And right now, you need me. That's enough for me to fight for you. Lyra lifted her head slightly, looking at him with cautious hope. You really mean that? I mean it with all my heart, Ethan said firmly. You are safe here, and I will do everything I can to keep it that way. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to feel something like trust, not just hope, but trust. Her body relaxed slightly against the blanket, and a faint, shy smile appeared on her face. Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders ease just a little. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous. Her enemies were likely more powerful than anything he had faced before. But right now, she was a child, and she needed a human who would stand by her. They sat together in silence for a while, the soft glow of the morning light wrapping around them like a protective shield. Ethan's mind raced with plans and possibilities, but he pushed them aside. The moment he was in now, holding Lyra safe, was all that mattered. He had made a choice, and that choice defined what it meant to be human. Not strength, not weapons, but compassion, courage, and the willingness to protect someone who could not protect themselves. Lyra finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think I'll ever be safe again? Ethan's eyes softened. Yes. With me, and with the choices we make together, you will be safe. I promise. She leaned closer, resting her small head against his arm, and for a fleeting moment, the fear that had haunted her seemed to disappear. Outside, the world continued as it always had, bright, cold, and uncertain. But inside that small apartment, warmth and trust had begun to grow. And Ethan knew, with a quiet certainty, that this small alien girl had just reminded him why humanity, in its simplest form, could rise above fear and danger, no matter how dark the world became. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, almost too still. Ethan sat near the window, watching the street below, his mind restless. Lyra was nearby, quietly tracing patterns on the floor with her small fingers, but her golden eyes kept flicking toward the door. Ethan noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the way she stiffened every time a shadow passed outside. They'll come for me soon, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and fearful. I can feel them. Ethan's heart tightened. He had hoped that bringing her inside, giving her warmth and shelter, would be enough to protect her. But now he realized that the danger was closer than he had imagined. His mind raced, thinking of ways to keep her safe. He had no weapons, no special training, only his human courage and determination. And that would have to be enough. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the apartment door. Ethan froze, recognizing the shape. Tall, armored figures, moving with the precision of trained soldiers. Lyra gasped, hiding behind him instinctively. "They're here," she whispered, clutching his coat tightly. Ethan stood slowly, placing himself between Lyra and the door. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. His voice was calm, but inside his heart pounded like a drum. The humans he had read about in stories had faced dangers like this, and now it was his turn. Protecting someone else, even at the risk of his own life, was what it meant to be human. The door burst open with a sharp crash. Ethan braced himself as the armored figures stepped inside. Their eyes glowed faintly behind their helmets, scanning the room with a cold, mechanical precision. Ethan's first instinct was to fight, but he quickly realized that brute strength alone wouldn't be enough. He needed a strategy, even if it was improvised. He grabbed a nearby chair and swung it, creating space and buying time. The soldiers advanced, but Ethan moved instinctively, blocking their path, shielding Lyra with his own body. Every punch, every dodge, was powered by desperation and courage. He had no training for this, but he had something stronger: human determination, the unwillingness to let harm touch someone he had sworn to protect. Then, something unexpected happened. Lyra's golden eyes began to glow, softly at first, then brighter, pulsing with energy that filled the room. A wave of warmth and light pushed the soldiers back, knocking them off their feet. Ethan stepped back in shock, watching as the tiny girl, trembling yet fierce, emitted a power he had never seen before. "Lyra, what are you doing?" he whispered, awe and fear mixing in his voice. I don't know," she said, her small hands shaking, energy radiating from her. I just want to be safe." Ethan nodded, understanding immediately. This wasn't just a frightened child. This was someone with strength, courage, and a connection to a power far beyond him. And yet it was her fear, her trust in him that had unlocked it. Humanity had given her hope, and that hope had turned into something incredible. The soldiers, disoriented and thrown back by her sudden burst of power, scrambled and retreated, leaving the apartment in chaos. Ethan knelt beside Lyra, pulling her into his arms. "You're safe now," he said, voice shaking. "It's over. For now." Lyra rested against him, trembling but alive. Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but full of relief. Ethan hugged her tightly. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for trusting me. That's what makes us human. Caring, protecting, never giving up, even when everything seems impossible." Outside, the city continued, unaware of the battle that had just taken place in a small apartment. But inside, a bond had grown stronger than fear, stronger than danger, and Ethan knew that whatever came next, he and Lyra would face it together, because courage, compassion, and humanity could shine even in the darkest moments. The apartment was quiet once more, but it was a fragile kind of quiet. Ethan sat on the floor with Lyra pressed close to him, both of them still catching their breath after the sudden attack. Her small body trembled, not from cold this time, but from the adrenaline and fear that had filled her moments before. Ethan held her tightly, trying to convey all the safety and warmth that his human presence could provide. "You're safe now," he said softly, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "No one will hurt you while I'm here." Lyra lifted, her golden eyes to his, and for the first time that evening, Ethan saw something more than fear. There was gratitude, awe, and a hint of something fragile. Trust. She had seen him fight, and yet she had not been afraid to rely on him. That trust, he realized, was more powerful than any weapon. I didn't know you would protect me like this, she whispered. Her voice was small, but there was a strength in it now that hadn't been there before. I didn't know humans could care this much. Ethan shook his head gently. Humans can be kind, Lyra. We can be brave too. But the most important thing we can be is compassionate. That's what makes us human. He smiled softly, though his eyes were still wary, scanning the apartment and its shadows. Danger could return at any moment, but for now, they had a moment of peace. Lyra leaned against him, curling into his side. I don't feel afraid when I'm with you, she said. Her words were hesitant but honest, like a small seed taking root. I think I can trust you. Ethan's chest tightened. He had never felt responsibility like this before. Not for a child, and certainly not for someone so small and fragile. But in that moment, he understood that humanity wasn't just about fighting or surviving. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves, about offering courage, warmth, and hope when the world seemed darkest. You don't have to face anything alone, Lyra, he said firmly. I'll be here. I'll make sure no one hurts you, I promise. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to relax fully against him. Her tiny fingers found his hand, gripping it with surprising strength. Ethan looked down at her, marveling at her resilience. She had endured so much already, yet she still had the courage to trust someone entirely unknown to her. Hours passed as they sat together, sharing quiet conversation and the soft comfort of companionship. Ethan told her stories of Earth, of humans, who had faced impossible odds and still helped others. Lyra listened, her golden eyes wide with wonder, absorbing not just the words but the intent behind them. She had seen fear and danger, but she had never witnessed this kind of bravery before. A quiet, unwavering courage born from care and determination. As night fell, Lyra rested her head on Ethan's lap, finally closing her eyes. Ethan carefully adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, ensuring she was warm and secure. He watched her breathe steadily, her small body rising and falling in time with the faint hum of the city outside. In that quiet moment, Ethan realized something profound. He had saved her, yes, but she had also reminded him of the best parts of humanity. The ability to care, to risk, to act with love even when nothing demanded it. That bond, that fragile connection between human and alien child, was stronger than fear, stronger than any threat they might face. You're safe, Lyra, he whispered again, and I'll do everything to keep it that way. No matter what comes next, we'll face it together. Lyra stirred slightly, murmuring a quiet, sleepy, "Thank you." Her words were small, but they carried the weight of hope and trust. And in that simple expression, Ethan understood everything he needed to know about courage, compassion, and what it truly meant to be human. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware of the bond forming in one small apartment. But inside, a light of hope and courage had been lit, and it would burn brightly through whatever challenges awaited them both. Days passed slowly, but for the first time, Lyra felt a fragile sense of safety. Ethan stayed close, patient and watchful, teaching her small human routines, how to make simple meals, how to read the time on a clock, and the gentle art of trust. With each passing day, her golden eyes began to show warmth, curiosity, and even laughter. A sound Ethan had almost forgotten existed in this harsh world. Then one morning, there was a knock at the door. Lyra froze instantly, her tiny body stiffening. Ethan moved in front of her instinctively, his heart pounding. He had feared this moment ever since she had revealed her story. But when he opened the door, he saw not enemies, but her mother, tall, regal, and radiating authority, with a calm yet intense presence that could command any room. "Lyra," the woman said softly, her golden eyes meeting her daughter's. "I've come for you." Lyra's lips trembled. "Mother?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Ethan stepped aside but stayed close. "She's safe," he said, his voice steady. "You've both been through enough already." The reunion was brief but powerful. Lyra ran into her mother's arms, sobbing and holding on as if she would never let go. The mother held her tightly, whispering words of comfort that Lyra had longed to hear. Ethan watched, his chest swelling with a mix of relief and pride. He had done more than protect her from danger. He had given her the human gift of trust, hope, and courage. "Thank you," the mother said to Ethan, her voice firm but filled with gratitude. "You risked everything for her. Not many would do what you did." Ethan shook his head, a soft smile on his lips. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because she needed someone to care. That's what being human is. We rise to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Lyra peeked up at him, her small face glowing with admiration. I'll never forget you," she said softly. "You don't have to," Ethan replied, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Just remember that humans can be kind. Courage and love can make a difference, even in the darkest times." Her mother nodded in agreement. "She has learned that from you," she said, her eyes meeting Ethan's with profound respect. "You have shown her the heart of humanity." As they prepared to leave, Lyra hugged Ethan tightly. "Will I see you again?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan smiled gently. "I don't know what the future holds, but know this. You will always have a human friend who cares for you. No matter where you go, that promise will stay with you." With one last look, they left, stepping into the sunlight together. Ethan watched them disappear, feeling a strange mix of emptiness and fulfillment. He had saved a life, yes, but more importantly, he had reminded himself of the essence of humanity: courage, compassion, and selfless love. The apartment felt quieter now, but it was a quiet filled with meaning. He had faced danger, fear, and uncertainty, yet he had acted with a heart guided by kindness. And that, he knew, was the most human thing of all. Later, Ethan walked outside, the city stretching endlessly before him. The rain had stopped, and the streets glimmered under the sunlight. Somewhere out there, a small alien girl was safe with her mother. She had learned what it meant to trust, to hope, and to believe in the goodness of humans. And Ethan, ordinary by every measure, had shown that even one human could make a galaxy of difference. In that moment, he felt a quiet pride swell within him. Humanity, he realized, was more than survival. It was rising above fear to protect others. It was courage in the face of danger, and it was love without expectation. And he had done all of that for a little girl who had needed him most. As he walked down the glimmering streets, he whispered softly to himself, "We humans, we will always rise." And somewhere in the distance he imagined Lyra smiling, her golden eyes shining with hope. A hope he had helped give her, and a reminder that even small acts of courage could change worlds.